We're calling the utility district meeting to order September 17th, 6:10 p.m. May we stand for a moment of silence and a pledge of allegiance to the flag.
Roll call. Roll call.
I'm sorry, we're going to do the roll call first. It's
Chair Tanya Davis Johnson. Pro Tem Lynn Hubbard.
here.
Board Member Kashama Miller Anderson.
Present.
Board Member Julia Botel.
Here.
Board Member Terrence Davis.
Here.
Mayor Thomas Masters. City Manager Karen Hoskins.
Here.
Executive Director Willie Horton.
Here.
District Deputy Clerk Jacqueline Burgess is present. District Attorney Andrew DeGraffenreich.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Councilman Terrence Davis will lead us in the pledge.
Shall we pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, I'll make the announcement that Councilwoman Botel is joining us by phone for the purpose of listening, but she won't be able to vote on the items.
Madam Chair.
Councilwoman Botel?
Why am I not able to vote?
Mr. Horton, did you explain?
No, I did.
Okay. The reason.
If I may, my recollection is that the policies you adopted provides that a member may participate in absentia and vote if they are ill and unable to attend the meeting at the time. It does not extend to when you're unavailable and it's not a result of physical illness or inability to get here.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I thought that Mr. Horton had went into the back to provide you with that information, but we'll move on. Members of the public shall be given a total of 3 minutes to speak on all items listed on the consent agenda. Any person who would like to speak on consent agenda items, please fill out a public comment card located on the table directly outside of the council chamber and give it to the staff prior to the adoption of the agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or substitution, Madam Manager?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Any from the board?
No.
Okay. Okay. Any disclosures by the board members?
No.
Okay. Can I, we'll adopt the agenda at this time. May I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Board Member Miller Anderson.
Yes.
Board Member Davis.
Yes.
Pro Tem Hubbard.
Yes.
Unanimous vote.
Okay. All matters listed under this item are considered to be routine, and action will be taken by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a board member so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the general order of business and considered in its normal sequence on the agenda.
Madam Chair, we do have one public comment card for consent agenda, and no further public comment cards will be accepted at this time.
Okay. Are there any items by the chair or any other, the mayor or any of the board members to be pulled?
No.
No.
Okay. Can I get a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Madam Chair, can we have the public comment first before you vote, please. On,
Not this.
no, item 1. They didn't pull any of the items. So you
But-
still like to comment on 1? Okay, you can vote. I'm sorry.
Well, he can still have his comment without us pulling it if that's the case. Okay. Okay, Madam Clerk. if you'll call
Board
the
Member
roll.
Davis,
Yes.
Board Member Miller Anderson,
Yes.
Pro Tem Hubbard,
Yes.
unanimous vote.
Okay. All right, any person who would like to speak on an agenda item, please fill out a public comment card located on the table directly outside of the council chamber and give it to the staff prior to the item being taken up by the Board of Directors for discussion. Members of the public will be given 3 minutes to speak on each regular agenda item. In no event will anyone be allowed to submit a comment card and speak on an agenda item after the resolution is read or item considered. Awards and presentation,
None,
public hearing.
none.
Public comment shall be given at 7:30 p.m. unless there is no further business of the Board of Directors, which in that event, it shall begin sooner. In addition, if an item is being considered at 7:30 p.m., then comments from the public shall begin immediately after the item has been concluded. Any person who would like to speak during public comments, please fill out a public comment card located on the table directly outside of the council chambers and give it to the staff before the public comment section is announced. Madam Manager, the regular agenda.
Resolution number 29-18 UD, a resolution of the Board of Directors of the City of Riviera Beach Utility Special District, Palm Beach County, Florida, adopting the fiscal year 2018-2019 budget for the Utility Special District and providing an effective date.
Madam Chair. So moved.
Can I get up?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Madam Chair. Madam Manager, sorry.
Madam Chair, this resolution is the approval of the FY19 Utility Special District budget. Mr. Horton is here to give a presentation.
Okay.
Also, Madam Chair, we do have one public comment card. No further public comment cards to be accepted at this time.
Okay, we'll hold them to after the presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, Madam City Manager. This slide here is just showing the org chart of the utility district. Utility district is made up of 59 positions with 3 divisions and the executive administrative group.
Madam Chair, can you go back? So the city manager, I'm sorry,
I was just saying, recognize.
the city manager, why isn't it underneath the board numbers? Why is it to the right?
Because the board has never taken action as to who the executive director of the utility district answers to. That has been a discussion since I walked through the door. So we actually are showing a dash line from the city manager to the executive director, but a direct report to the board of directors,
So the executive director reports to
the
the board members according to the way the charter is written, because nothing else has been put into play.
That's correct.
Okay, we need to keep that in mind.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, that's it.
Any more questions?
Nope, that's it.
Continue.
This is an overview of the department with the budget modifications where we're adding 6 additional water treatment plant operators. On this slide, we do have the 11 customer service employees, but we've dropped that from the budget. It is not a part of the budget, so as we go through the budget, you will not find a cost in here relating to the 11 customer service workers. And then at the bottom, of course, are the goals that we've established for FY19.
Madam Madam Chair.
Councilwoman?
So in here, the 11 are being moved, is what you're saying?
No, they are not
They're
being
not,
moved.
okay, I was watching, but I
Now,
wasn't
this was
listening, I
on
guess.
the original request, but as we continue to develop the budget, we chose not to
Not to move them?
include it in this budget.
Okay,
We may bring it up mid-year or what have you.
okay, thank you. That's it.
Okay, go ahead.
Here, you see our revenue, our renewal and replacement funds. As you can see, the adjusted budget for FY18 totaled $10,760,000. For the new fiscal year upcoming, we're a little bit less than that, a little more than $1 million less than that at $9,338,000. This does present a balanced budget based upon the revenue of $9,338,000.
So, Mr. Horton, all of the projects that we have allocated in our capital budget are
This is
accounted
renewal and replacement. There's another portion for capital level.
but this is just renewal and replacement of the,
This will be the water meters that are included in this. We have repair and maintenance costs associated with this particular sheet that we're showing.
okay. It's just a little small for me here, so that's why.
Yes, ma'am. I apologize.
No, it's okay.
Let me see if I can.
Okay.
Let me see if I can make it. I can't do it on this one.
Mm-hmm.
It's not letting me do
It's in
it.
the book.
That's right,
Yes.
before those pages.
Madam Chair, I think Councilwoman Botel.
No, I'm sorry, I'm talking to myself.
Is that right? Councilwoman, you were saying it was in the book?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, all righty.
The next is the impact fees. As you can see, for in the adjusted budget for 2018, we had shown $4,194,991. For the proposed fiscal year 2019, we're showing $4,122,981. The biggie in this is the raw water wells. We have 2 new wells that we will have to drill and install within the next 3 years to be in compliance with the permit that was given to us by the South Water Management District. So that's a part of that.
Okay, so the South Water Management District gave us a permit for,
They actually gave us a permit for 5 years. I think we're into the 2nd year. 3rd year. So we have 3 years to go. We have year 3, 4, and 5 to go in order to construct those 2 new wells.
okay, so this is what we requested of them, a permit to drill 2 more wells?
Yes, ma'am. This will bring us to a total of 29 wells.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, debt service, FY 2018 was $4,261,525. For FY 2019, we show $4,265,400.
So, question, Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Which one of the debt services, or is it the entire lot that we are increasing, that we're paying back with the 10% increase?
I'm not, Randy, what portion? Is it the 2016 series? 2016 series.
The 2016 series. So how are we paying the other,
We've shown an amount there of 770,000 for the principal and 981,000 for the interest.
So my question is, if we're using the 10% increase to pay back the 2016,
Yes, ma'am.
and the other ones that we're still paying back, are we still paying them back, or are they paid?
No, they're
Off
not
in
paid.
total.
We're still paying them back. The 2014 will not be paid off until 2034. And the 2016 will be paid off in 2036.
Okay, so. I guess because we got more.
Madam Chair, what was the question? I'm sorry.
He said 2037 for the 2014 one, and 2016 is 2036.
For 2016?
That's what he said.
2016 is 2036. Is that right, Randy? And 2014 is 2034.
You said 37, so 34.
Did I say 37?
Yeah, that's what I was trying
apologize.
to, okay, 34.
2014 is 2036.
2014 is 2034.
2034, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I
And-
guess,
Okay, thanks.
And 2016 is 2036.
I guess the concern will always be until that point. We promised to pay this back based on the 10% increase of the residents' water bill every year. Is that the sole source of how we're planning to pay off this particular debt at this time?
Well, it's based upon our revenue that we receive. And so as long as we continue to receive the revenue that we have projected, we will have sufficient funds to repay the bonds or the monies that we've borrowed.
The revenue that we projecting is based on the 10% increase, inclusive of the 10% increase on
That is
water,
correct.
the water bill.
That is correct.
What I'm concerned about with that is we have to figure out or to see if there's any kind of way that we can buy down the debt so that we can pass it on to the residents, or we'll never be able to decrease the amount of the residents' water bills at this time.
Well, that would be great if we didn't have so many needs within the utility. I mean, the reason that these bonds were floated were to meet the needs of the utility, both from a water
Absolutely.
and a wastewater perspective. So until we get all of those projects complete, there would not be any extra dollars to pay down the bonds with, because we're spending the monies based upon what we told the bonding agencies we would need the monies for, to use it for those projects.
That, okay, and I understand what you're saying. It's just that I just think that it's hard for the residents. There were a few people out in the lobby today that was just, devastated with their water bills and the increase. So I hope that there's something that we can do, and like you say, we need the water pipes replaced, we need all of the underground utilities done, and we do have those needs to meet to be able to provide water one way or another. But hopefully we can figure it out somehow how we can buy down that debt, and if we can buy down the debt, we'll figure out, keep our fingers crossed that we can pass it on to our residents.
Yes, ma'am. We're not at that point at this point, but maybe in the future.
No. I hear you. We are not where we can buy the debt down at this time, but I mean, I think that's something we need to have in the forefront of our mind that we'd like to do.
Yes, ma'am.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Davis?
Mr. Horton, how many vacancies currently we have at the district?
We have approximately 8 vacancies presently.
And the total value of those 8
Of
vacancies?
those 8 vacancies, I'm now guessing from the top of my mind with the fringes, will be close to $1 million.
Thank you. Oh, Madam Chair, one last question. So we get into more of a detailed presentation about that bond was taken out years ago, the previous council, what was the intent, how much is valued, and where's the money going. I think one of the things that we need to make sure we do is really educate the community on the money, those rate hikes, and how significant these issues are, and what DEP has put us on notice with and recommended that we need to get taken care of, and what's the value to that, and where are our options, where the money can come from. People need to know. We need to continue drilling down the educational process on why the council at the time floated a bond.
Yes, sir. As we continue through the presentation, you will actually see what the cost for the next 5 years will be as it relates to funding. So we have that in the presentation. May I continue, Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
This next slide shows the specific, the dollars where they're going to be used. This is out of the 2016 proceeds. Is that right, Randy? This is out of the 2016 proceeds, and these are just some of the projects that are shown. In FY 2018, we had an adjusted budget of $21,897,239. For 2019, there's a balance of $35 million. We show projected spending of about $20,285,803. Any questions on this slide?
Any questions for this slide?
No.
Go ahead, Mr. Horton.
All right. In our enterprise fund for projects, and I'm going to try to bring all of this up if I can. This needs to go away, but I'll just go down. Well, bottom line, this total cost for the for FY19 is $45,705,595. And to the right, you see all of the projects that would be associated with those dollars. This, for the next 5 years, the cost is estimated to be $85,596,235. That is inclusive of the $45,000 I just spoke about.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Councilman.
Mr. Horton, did you mean 85 million or 85,000?
Thank you. I'm so sleepy. I mean 85 million.
Told
Okay.
you what to do earlier.
Yes, ma'am. The Honorable Councilwoman Miller Anderson told me to go home and go to bed. I apologize. But yes, it's $85,596,235
In the next 5 years.
for the next 5 years. Any questions from this slide with the projects that are listed? Okay, hearing none. Madam Chair, that pretty much completes the presentation from the utility district. This particular, these numbers were already presented to the full council at the first reading. There are no changes to what was presented in the first reading. So I would encourage the board to adopt this so that we can move forward to council on Wednesday of this week for adoption.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilwoman.
So because nothing changed, that's why we didn't go through the other sections, the administration and water distribution and all of those?
I didn't put the details up here, but if you have any specific questions, I would be glad to answer them.
Can you go back to that screen?
It's not on the slideshow, what she's asking about. She's asking on the detail
Right,
sheets, I
but
believe.
why didn't you include all of it, though?
Well, I think I can pull it up. Do you have it on your thumb drive? You have it on your thumb drive?
We
I
have
do.
it in the book.
Well, the public can't see the book.
Yeah, I don't have those detail sheets on the thumb drive, and we didn't do that in the original presentation when we presented to the
Well, we
full
probably
council.
should. Can we pull it up through the internet for the city? Through the city's website? So while we're doing that, though, I did have a question about the stipend that we had. Where would that be? I don't know if that's.
You no
already-
longer have the stipend, so it won't show anything.
So the money has just been absorbed at
Yes,
where?
ma'am. Let me try to pull it up this way. Give me a second,
Okay.
please. It's not allowing me.
While she's trying to pull it up, Mr. Horton,
Yes, ma'am.
it was distributed back into the general fund of the utility district?
It was absorbed back into the general fund of the utility district.
Okay, because I was asking Mr. Horton earlier about those dollars that, being able, to fund the he said when we do our landscaping around all of those monuments, we would have to drop a meter and pay for those, the watering of those plants. So I was thinking that we could use those funds to pay for the watering of those, plants if we're gonna be asked to drop a meter and figure out how to pay for them. So, my understanding is that we can't do it like that because the water utility district doesn't pay for water bills. Only the general fund on the city side, you can pay for the cost of water.
The utility doesn't give water away. We have to charge for every drop of water
Absolutely.
that we produce. So, and the rates are based upon the water that we produce. So if the council wanted to identify projects that they want to irrigate, the council can do that from a general fund perspective and add a meter in that where the district can recover the cost for that water that's being produced and move forward from that perspective. But the utility could not be doing it because we would be giving water away.
So if we were to say those funds, if we had given, or if we give those funds to the general fund to cover the cost of the landscaping, the irrigation to the landscaping, because, at the end of the day, we don't want it to become an excuse why we can't have aesthetically pleasing things on the west side of the city. If we put those funds over in the finance department for general funds, is that a way to get that done? Or that's not
I'm sorry,
feasible idea?
please repeat. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
I was just thinking about the funds that Councilwoman Miller Anderson was asking about. If we took those funds and we gave those funds so they were our funds, still our funds, and we say, hey, as opposed to taking them for ourselves, we're going to give them, we're going to take all of our money and donate it to the general fund to pay for the landscaping, the irrigation to the landscaping in Riviera Beach on the west side, then we could very well do that.
Madam Chair and members of the board, they're no longer your funds. When the board voted to abolish the stipend, those dollars went back into the utility coffer. Now, what you said, if that's something that you wanted to do, the individual board members would need to accept the stipend and then contribute it to but not as an enterprise fund. The enterprise fund cannot do that.
Madam Chair, I think that may sound along the same lines as, remember, Dr. Botel talked about having a program set up for helping the senior citizens with their water bills, and you said that we couldn't do that, or?
That is correct.
I mean, yeah, but it's only a little bit, so it was something in addition to, I don't know the specifics of it, but something she was speaking about, and she can answer that, not me. I'm just mentioning that she brought it up. And you said we could not utilize those funds for that?
That is correct. The dollars that are used for that is the general fund pot that funds that, not the enterprise fund.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Councilwoman Botel.
I'm just wondering if we couldn't set up a separate fund, separate from the city fund, so that it would be a utility fund that would fund those seniors. I mean, I understand that we couldn't put that $12,000 into the city, but what if we kept it utility and then set up a different fund in the utility budget? Would that work at all?
If we're hearing you correctly, Councilwoman Botel, that's what he's telling us that we cannot do. We would have to receive those funds back to ourselves and then give them back where we wanted them to go. My concern is, even if we don't use this particular monies to pay for irrigation and to keep the city looking nice on the west side, somebody somehow, some way have to find out how we are going to irrigate the landscaping of the west side, because our objective here is to make it clean, to keep it beautiful, and the only way that you can keep the plants alive is going to be to water them. I don't want, if we want to take the money back and we want to put it into a general fund to pay for the water, then that's fine. But one way or another, we are going to have to pay for the irrigation of the landscaping that we're embarking on right now.
Madam Chair.
Madam, Councilwoman Botel? Councilwoman Botel?
Yes.
Okay, did you want to say anything else?
Well, if it can't be done, I guess, I think it's a shame that we can't use that money towards seniors' utility bills, but it can't be done.
Okay. Councilman Terrence Davis.
Thank you. Mr. Horton, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do recall when we were discussing the stipend at that time that you did inform this council of, if we want to take that position, keep the stipend in the budget so we can make that decision then. But is that what you recommended to the board?
What I recommended to the board when Councilwoman Botel brought it up, and I believe it was around the same time that we were discussing the elimination of the stipend, I suggested that if the board members wanted to receive the stipend, it's then the board members' money, they could then dedicate it where they want it dedicated. But once it comes back into the coffers of the enterprise fund, we could not do it as a utility.
I just want to say that for the record, because when staff gave us clear direction and clear options to achieve the goals that we're discussing, we must put our business hat on and keep the political hat off, because we had an opportunity to do that. And now we're talking about potentially being in the newspaper again. Riviera Beach reaccepts the stipend. They're not going to say Riviera Beach reaccepts the stipend to give the residents a break. They won't do that. One of the things that we did, Mr. Sherman, this is prior to you coming, didn't we adjust the millage rate at the time to hold off a year, or did we take some of the vacant positions and disperse them that didn't get filled that year? Because we had a year, I think it was 2015, where we did not increase I'm trying to recall.
Yeah, I'm trying. Randy Sherman, Finance Director. I'm trying to recall.
I can't remember what year it was.
I want to say it might have been 15 that we rolled back the millage rate slightly. Yeah, I think that was the right year. I think that's the year that we did it.
I asked that question, but and one of the things that I would like to see staff do at the end of this budget is talk about what impact Amendment 1 has on the decisions that we're making. Because if it wasn't for the potentially Amendment 1 passing, we could take that in consideration this year, but we can't. And I think staff need to put that a part of the end of the presentation of all our budget decisions, because folks need to understand about, when you vote on Amendment 1, what that really means and how it impact all our local cities. So it takes us out of position from rolling that millage rate. But one of the questions I would like to ask, that's why I asked the question earlier, if we got those 8 vacancies, have they rolled into the general fund? They haven't rolled yet, correct? They're still in the budget.
You're talking about the vacant positions that I have? The vacant positions that I have are, and I'll just tell you what they are. We have an engineer position that's vacant. We have the senior engineer position that's vacant. We have the assistant superintendent of water treatment that's vacant. We have the superintendent of collection and distribution that is vacant. We have 2 senior mechanics, 3 senior mechanic positions that are vacant. I'm missing 1 more position. And 1 plant operator position is vacant.
So Mr. Horton, so with those vacancies, are we allowed, since we hadn't filled those positions this year, to take that funds to pay down towards the bond? Is that legal for us to do?
If the board chose to direct that those positions not be filled?
No, this year they didn't get filled, so the money was allocated for it in 2018.
That is correct.
So 2019, we're approaching a new year.
Of those positions, there are only 3 out of those. All of those positions, there's only 3 positions that covered the full year.
Oh, okay.
Some were vacated throughout the fiscal year. So out of the 8 that I've just named, I think there were only 3. There may be 4 positions that covered the entire year. That included the senior engineer position and the engineer position. And now that I think about it, the assistant superintendent for water treatment didn't cover the full year because I came to the board to add that position. I took a vacant position, reclassed it up to create the assistant superintendent for water treatment.
So it was a vacant full-time position?
There was a vacant full-time, but it was a lower position that we then reclassed.
So, like I said, we don't have that exact number right now. But
correct.
Is it possible, if it was enough money, is it legal for this board to make a decision? The money that's in the fund, not for next year, because you definitely want to fill those positions because we need them. But the money that's in the budget currently,
yes, sir,
prior to October 1 approaching, could we take some of that money and pay down on the bond?
I think,
or would it put us in
if we didn't touch those monies to make other adjustments as we went through the fiscal year, that would be possible. But as we had savings moving forward, we utilized those savings to meet other needs in the utility.
That's close, but no. Randy Sherman again. In your bond documents, there is a flow of funds. So the funds come into the district. The first thing that they have to do is pay for operating expenses. Okay. Then the money that is left after operating expenses goes and pays the debt service. And then it funds the renewal and replacement account, and it funds, but there's a certain flow of funds, and I obviously don't have that with me tonight, but at the end of the day, no matter what the reason, whether it's vacancies or flow is higher, so you're collecting more revenues, at the end of the day, there's 2 buckets that the money falls into. The money can either go to reserves, okay, or it can go into capital. In order to take money out of the reserves and pay down bonds, and I was trying to call the document up real quick, and I didn't get there before you asked your question. You can only call bonds on certain dates. I mean, it's not like your regular bank loan where you can go in at any time and prepay it down. It used to be that you couldn't call bonds until the 10th year. So obviously 2016, you wouldn't be able to do it till 2026. And the reason for that is when people invest in your bonds, they're looking for the cash flow over a long period of time. And they don't want people, give you $30 million today and you pay it off tomorrow. I mean, so there's a time frame, and I'd have to, look into that and figure out exactly when that is. But again, there's a flow of funds that you have to follow. When the money gets to those last two buckets, that's when then you can decide to do something. So again, just because maybe funds didn't get spent on a particular reason, if flow is down and your revenues are down, maybe there isn't anything at the end of the day. So again, you have to have a certain amount of revenue. You have to have coverages compared to the debt service. It's a pretty lengthy process, and at some point, if you'd like us to come back and actually walk through that and show you how that actually works, we certainly could.
I think it would definitely be appropriate at some time with you, the city manager, and of course, Mr. Horton.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Councilman, I need to also indicate that staff has just informed me there's nothing left there because we've used those dollars for temp services and for overtime. So there is no monies left. When those positions were vacated, we needed to cover the need of those positions being vacant to address the needs of the utility.
So so I guess that addresses this year, but potentially next year, as we approach, we're going to still have another year for this to increase based upon the contract, correct? The bond.
That's correct.
So I guess as you all get through this budget, we can still take that into consideration based upon the time, the specific time specification that Mr. Sherman was discussing. So next year at the time, the council, the district can make a decision based upon if it's presented. It may be another year, maybe another 2 years. We don't know until they review the information. I think we want to make sure we have all our options to the table because you see what the council definitely wants to do. You gave us one option, but we didn't do it. And so right now we kind of limited in what we can do because we wait to this point to address it. So definitely want to do whatever we need to do, get creative if that's possible, get with legal and figure out what we could do, if anything. But if not, let's keep educating our people on what they're paying for.
I think it's important to keep in mind that, in this budget, I'm requesting 6 additional positions for the water plant. That is to meet the staffing needs to cover 24/7 operation in the water plant. As we move forward, until those positions are filled, we have spent a lot of money and overtime in the water plant because we didn't have the staffing to do all that we needed to do. And a lot of people don't understand that the water plant personnel not only operates the water plant, they operate the well fields. They pull all of the samplings that need to be done on a daily basis, both on the plant site and out in the community. There's still 5 sites that we are required to pull samples on a daily basis, and that has to be done. So on those days when I only have one person on shift, we have to call someone else in an overtime status to provide those off-site support functions. So those types of things will continue to exist until we get fully staffed.
Madam Chair. Madam Chair.
1 minute, Councilwoman Botel.
So, Mr. Sherman, Mr. Horton, I think it's very important that we definitely, as we move forward and address these issues in the budget, redirect the council and the public sometimes back to some of the issues that came up in the Michael Brown report, the U.S. Water report. These are concerns. They talked about the fact that we were understaffed, about the wells, about the filtration systems. So everything you discussing now was in that packet that you see me keep bringing up.
And we're still faced with many of those issues, which we are attacking in a very aggressive way. We, in the last 11 months, have met, as an example, with the health department 4 times. And they are appreciative of that. We've even gone to them to talk about where we've made mistakes, but we don't just tell them about the mistakes we've made. We provide them with the corrective actions that we are taking or have taken moving forward so that those types of mistakes will not be made again. We've also met with the Department of Environmental Protection 3 times in the last 11 months. We've met with South Florida Water Management District twice, twice at their location, and once they came to our location. So we've met with them 3 times. So we have built the rapport with the regulatory communities, that they see that we're serious about addressing the needs of the utility with the action of this board and the support that you all have given to this utility to bring on the expertise that we need to address many of the issues that we have. The regulatory communities are looking at that very favorably, as well as our rating agency, which is very important. So I just want to keep that before you. Everything that you do makes a difference, and it impacts how we may be able to move forward to do whatever we want to do that protects the public health and safety moving forward. So,
and I say thank you.
Madam Chair.
And I say thank you because that's important that the public understands what DEP was requesting of us. And when we do our presentations, let's redirect this board, the public, back to here's what we was requesting, here's what's addressing these issues that we was put on notice with. You know, we got some things that we have to continue to be aggressive on, and those are things that we need to focus our attention on. And I tell this board, we as a team must not lose focus on how aggressive we need to be, because we still have more money that we need to get. No one wants to float bonds and do these things, but you see infrastructure all across the country crumbling, but because other leaders never made a decision, and they was afraid of making decisions, and people's lives were lost based on it, and infrastructure was crumbling. So we need to let folks know we're in a position to not feel like other cities have done. We're in a position where we can really get behind you, your expertise, working with the entire staff, finance, city manager, all your staff, to put this city in the next 10 years at a certain level, because that plant's going to hold for another 10 to 15 years. But what's our long-term plan? We need to discuss that. You know, we must make a long-term plan in play and put this council and the next council in position to move forward in it with a long-term plan presented.
Thank you.
Done, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilwoman Botel.
Thank you. I want to make it clear. I have a question for Mr. Horton. Mr. Horton, when we gave up that $12,000, was there a discussion about whether it could be used for supplementing seniors' utility bills? At that table, the use of that for supplementing seniors' utility bills, it was left.
I'm sorry. Try again, Councilwoman.
The question of leaving the $12,000 in place, when we gave it up, was there ever a suggestion that if we didn't give it up, it could be used at our discretion for relieving the burden on seniors for their utility bill?
I don't remember us having that discussion, but Mr. Horton is going to answer your question. Do you remember?
I don't recall there being a stipulation when the board elected to give up the stipend.
So that was not an option. That was not an option presented to us. Am I right?
Well, what I indicated to the board was that you could receive the $12,000, and then you, as individual board members, because at that point it is your money, you could dedicate it or donate it to how you see fit. But you all never made a decision on that. So once you gave it up, the stipend went away, and those dollars went back into the enterprise coffins.
Two things to that end. Let the board reflect that Chair Tanya Davis Johnson has joined us on the dais, and Mr. Horton, I don't think that if we're, you know, in our search for solutions to do something better for the aesthetics of the city, if we have to do something to be legal and strategic, if we take it back and then put it where it needs to be because we're dealing with an enterprise fund, then, you know, I think we can do that. I don't remember it ever being an option that, or specified that, you know, once it was done, it was a done deal. It doesn't matter, you know, if it was or if it wasn't. We're looking for a solution to pay for the water that we're going to have to pay for on the west side if we're talking about maintaining the appearance or stepping up the appearance of the community, the interior communities on the west side. So if we have to go through those mechanics and those gyrations to put those funds in place, then, you know, so be it. Then that's something I think that we can do or have to do. But we talked about the utility district and Public Works and Finance coming up with a way to pay for the water that it takes to make our city look nice. And we can't hide behind the fact that we don't have money to water the arterial streets, you know, or the swales or wherever we have landscaping on the west side. We've got to step it up and make it cleaner and more pleasing.
Madam Chair.
So, Councilwoman Miller Anderson.
If you finish, you finished?
I am.
Okay. The positions that you said have been vacant, what do you foresee being the reason why we can't get those filled?
I'm going to address the engineering side for a moment. We've scheduled, selected and scheduled interviews for people to interview for the senior engineer position, as an example. And we would schedule 3 interviews, and when we get to the interview date, none of the candidates showed up. I've heard things, and I can only go on what I hear. When they see, you know, people will look at the full makeup of the city, and one of the things they look at are our board meetings, whether it's the utility board meeting, which I think you all have conducted yourselves very well since I've been here in the utility board meeting, but when they look at the city council meeting, it is a different take. And when people see that, they paint a broad stroke for the city that we are that way. If you recall, I made you all aware of some comments that I received from New York
Right.
for that same thing. So I think that based upon what I've heard,
And so that's what you think is the main issue?
it could be.
And I can agree with you, but I also can attest that it goes both ways, because there are a lot of things that are said about different department heads and things that are going on in departments where employees aren't exactly being treated very well. And so I think that is an issue too. So we all need to look at ourselves and figure out how we can make this a better city and a nice place to work, live, and play. And I think that's a part that we all can fix too. Like I said before, I've said it numerous times, I'm sure that's why we're having some issues with getting qualified city managers. I'm sure that is probably the same reason why some people are not applying, but at the same time, there's somebody out there that needs a job. Even if we got people applying who may not be qualified, people are still applying, and they're gonna show up because people, I'm not saying that, suggesting that that is always the right thing, which I don't agree with, but I just don't see people applying for a job, getting an interview, and just don't show up. Now that is a big stretch for me, and I'm not saying that it didn't happen, but that is a big stretch. You will get unqualified people to show up, apply, show up, interview, and get the job. So I just wonder sometimes why are we, because like in the building department, I mean, the same thing.
Well,
You know, and
Madam,
so, like I said, I agree with you on your point, but I also agree there are some things that need to be done on the inside of some of the departments as well, so that it is inviting and warm, and people have the employees are able to go out and say nice things about what's going on in their department, so they could recruit people as well. So that is something we all need to work on.
in addition,
I
if
agree
I may,
with you.
there, other issues also include the competitiveness. What we're finding across the board with a lot of positions is that it is so competitive. We in Riviera Beach aren't as competitive with some of our sister communities that as we should be, but that doesn't excuse the fact that people don't show up for a scheduled interview.
Right.
I mean, I had one. I've had this to happen to me in 2 separate interviews. I had one person when I was recruiting for the assistant executive director of the district, had him set up by Skype, and they didn't show up.
And the flip side of that too, I've also, spoken to a few people that had applied that according to the criteria in their resume, they did qualify and they were qualified for the position, but they were not called for for an interview. So I don't know, whoever.
In the utility district?
Not necessarily in the utility. I can't speak to your specific, just in general, different departments where people are like, I put in applications, I meet the qualifications, and they just never got a call. So
And maybe in
do
their
we
mind
go through
they meet,
everybody? I mean, you
maybe
pull
in their
them all.
mind they meet qualifications, but when it comes when
And you're speaking from your
well,
department.
I mean, we have to look at the best qualified. I mean, that's what we're doing. We're
Of course.
shopping
That's
for
what we
the
want.
best qualified people to bring the best quality to this community. So, they may or may not be aware.
I think it's just based on the criteria that's stated, based on what's stated to even get to the point of getting a call. They meet that criteria now. What they do in the interview is a whole different story, but they didn't even get a call based on them meeting the criteria. And so, and this is not to any of the positions that you may be over, but, maybe when they're going through the list, are we making a serious effort to try to bring in as many people as we can, especially if 2 or 3 don't show up, do we move on to the next? And as long as they're qualified, do we try to get them in? It's almost like we can't give a job away. And I know there's a lot of people out there that need jobs. So I just question as to what's going on. Thank
Madam
you.
Chair. Madam Councilwoman.
What I would suggest is for those individuals who have indicated to you that they met the minimum qualifications, have the city manager take a look at that, because, folks may feel that they have met the qualifications based on some piece, part, or parcel of a job application. I would like to see those who've said that they've met the qualifications, have the city manager take a look at those applications and those applications along with the job announcements to make sure that we are, in fact, doing what we should be doing by way of screening. I would also say that at some point, we have not had faith, shall we say, faith or belief in the abilities of our staff. And it just seems to me that in addition to individuals maybe not showing up for interviews, and that is not outside the norm. Folks just don't show up, and I don't necessarily know that that is a negative reflection upon us, but I do know that there has been quite a bit that has been going on throughout the city with the involvement of council in selection and with regards to, how things are actually laid out, and that just crosses the line of interference for me. I'm just seeing where there is just there's always this hand involved in the day-to-day operation, and that's certainly not our role. If we believe that the folks that are employed by us are not competent, then we need to move and make some changes. And in addition to us not being able to get, I was just sitting listening to the councilwoman's points, you know, we have to take some responsibility for why we may not necessarily be getting the people that we want based on the actions that permeate and start from this dais. And so until we clean up how we operate, we're going to have this continued disconnect as it relates to, selection, interviewing, and those who may be expressing an interest. Now, what I can say, because I'm a member of the Palm Beach Partners, our counterparts, which are the City of West Palm, City of Lake Worth, we are talking about Solid Waste Authority, we're talking about South Florida Water Management District, we're all having the same challenges, colleagues, we're all having the same challenges as it relates to being able to get folks who are, number one, qualified, but who are willing to accept the salaries as those salaries are being presented. So we've got to take a look, and I believe that we were taking a look at how we were offering our positions, how we were pricing our positions, and you know, what structures we were putting in place. And so as we do that, I think that universally and throughout Palm Beach County, we're going to see competitiveness, but we're going to see more people applying for the positions that we have. Have we had challenges? Absolutely. But how do we move to success and getting these vacant positions filled? Now, and I'm done with that, but I wanted to come back and with regards to the use of the stipend for covering the cost of assistance. We didn't put that in place when we initially removed the stipend, but during the budget process, we asked that question, and I recall being told that once those dollars went back into the USD, we could not pull them out for our individual uses or special programs.
That is correct,
Was that
Madam
correct?
Chair. Yes,
So are we now, and I'm coming in on the tail end, but are we now wanting to utilize those dollars for
Madam Chair.
something else?
One minute.
Can I
Madam Millie Anderson, give me 1 minute. The question was this: Mr. Horton had stated that any water that we use to irrigate the landscaping that we're planning for the west side, we would then have to drop a meter and figure out how those waters would be paid for. So the question became, can we take those dollars to fund that purpose? And he's stating from where those dollars are sitting right now, you cannot do that. You cannot do that from where the dollars are sitting right now. So just thinking and trying to come up with solutions, one of the things that we bantered up here was, if we received the monies back as stipend and then gave them to the general fund where he indicated water have to be paid from, was that an option? Also, Madam Councilwoman Botel asked, and Councilwoman Miller Anderson, about helping the senior citizens out with more assistance on their water bill with the same dollars. So we were talking about, how do you get those dollars from an enterprise fund into the general fund where they can be used, because they cannot be used for anything where they're sitting now.
And the option would be to return the stipend to us, and then we return the stipend to the general fund for a purpose?
Yes, ma'am.
Is this an administrative, just an administrative function?
Well, you would actually be receiving an income for the 12,000, and I think it's important to understand that it's not just the 12, 24, 36, 48, 60, 72, 72,000. When you add the fringes to it, I think it came to a total of about 140,000.
It's 110.
$110,000 is what we're talking about. So, yes, you would have to, the board would have to reestablish a stipend, receive the stipend, and then donate it to where you want it to go.
we're not waiting for me.
Madam,
I was gonna, no, yeah, it was the same thing. I'm good.
okay, so, Madam Councilwoman, so that was it, that's what the discussion was about. You have any more to that?
Have my colleagues weighed in on the probability of reinstating the stipend for that purpose?
No, we didn't. We were just talking about it, and we didn't vote on it or anything. Everybody just, was trying to get information as how it could possibly be done, because as Public Works was stated earlier, they didn't have the money in their budget to pay for the watering. And, and my concern is this, and I'll say it again, one way or another, we have to pay for it, so, because I think the West Side deserves to look nice as well. So, and I don't want anybody to think that it's acceptable is to just tell us that we don't have the money to pay for water on the West Side, so there won't be any watering of the plants there.
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
is there irrigation currently in all of our main thoroughfares, or would that be a part of a cost that we would have to absorb as well?
I would have to refer to the Public Works Director.
Mr. Bailey? He's outside. I don't think it's there in all places. I don't think it's.
So wonderful to be in the utility district meeting. It's so different than.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Terrence Bailey, Interim Public Works Director. The majority of our major thoroughfare medians have irrigation. There are a few, I believe that there were a few projects in the previous few years for some upgrades, but I don't know, I can't swear that every single median has irrigation. I'd have to investigate and provide a report back.
And what's the standard cost, best guesstimate, for the installation of irrigation along MLK? I think we have some at Australian. We have some along Australian, all the way down to Blue Heron. So what areas outside of Blue Heron Boulevard, the entryway to the city from Lake Park, on both sides, on Congress and President Barack Obama Highway, do we have irrigation there?
I believe there was a capital sheet a few years ago for irrigation, and I don't remember if it was new irrigation or replacement to the tune of $200,000 or $300,000 for Obama, and I believe it was split up into two phases, north of Blue Heron and south. But I believe that there was an issue with that, and it may or may not have gotten completed. I'd have to research where that ended up. But most of the medians, the major medians, have irrigation. It would be simply looking at, it depends on availability of water. If you have to cross, imagine if you're looking at the median for Blue Heron, if you've got to cut into the asphalt to get to the water main to bring in a new tap, it gets extremely expensive to tap the main, bring water over to the median, a meter and a backflow preventer, and then do distribution inside the medians for the irrigation in the median or at one of the welcome signs.
What are we paying annually for water to the sites that currently have irrigation? Do we know?
I do not have that number handy.
Mr. Sherman, do you know?
No. It's spread across multiple general ledger accounts for the different divisions in Public Works, but we could provide a report on that quickly.
Because it makes no sense for us to plant flowers, grass along these areas, and there is no irrigation to sustain it, because we would just be, putting in landscaping, snatching it out as it dies. For instance, we have irrigation on Australian at First Street, but we've got issues. I believe we have irrigation there. I've seen water in the median, so I'm thinking about at the entry sign. So we have flowers and plants that are perishing. So we would have to rip that out. We're going through this process. We've got to be more cost prudent, but we want to make sure that we uphold the same level of service and visibility and look and feel, the aesthetics citywide.
So we've got to figure it out. So the question for me is, how much money are we spending for water? Because that's going to determine whether or not the dollars from the stipend, and I don't know that the stipend, re-implementing the stipend and doing that, because that, you put that back in the check, then that affects the bottom line number of the payroll. So we've got to think about the residual outcomes that will happen as a result of us trying to do that. Mr. Sherman, you were
Chair.
up here earlier. Yes, ma'am.
In the general fund, you currently have budgeted in Public Works, all of it's coming from Public Works, correct? That irrigation cost?
No, remember you have elements that come from parks as well for the areas that parks has responsibility over.
Okay, you have 377,000 budgeted, just for Public Works,
For utilities?
for utilities, water.
Okay, the irrigation, when we did, First Street, the sprinklers were not included in that?
I was not affiliated with the project. I would have to go down there and inspect it to determine the level of irrigation or
I
support.
was certain that there was, water brought to that site when it was done, so maybe not, maybe it needs to be checked, or to see if the sprinkler system isn't coming on or isn't working. Find out, I guess, from the staff, was it manually done? But the areas that I was referring to is the entryway to the city, like First in Australia, the neighborhoods, the community neighborhood signs and the monument signs that we have, that there is, when we install them, that we're installing the irrigation necessary to, and because in looking at the cost analysis sheet, there was an RFP that would include irrigation as well as the landscape, the monument, and the design. So when you put it back out, you'll be putting it out for the irrigation along with the landscaping.
For the current project, for the larger welcome signs, did include landscaping and irrigation at the 7 signs that were installed.
Right.
Not at the 23 community signs.
So when you put the community signs, the irrigation, I know you gave us a price like 200 and something thousand. It would be for irrigation and landscape for the neighborhood signs, and that's what I'm saying. The neighborhoods have to look aesthetically pleasing, because it becomes infectious. When the residents see us doing our part, they're gonna do their part on their street, in their neighborhoods, and that's why we have the nice signs there, but they have to, be a little bit more pleasing.
No
So
problem.
that's where I'm talking about dropping the wells for the meters, rather, for those 23 signs, as well as the entryway signs. That's I'm not really talking more or less about the perimeter, because that's all we do. That's all we do is the perimeter. I'm talking about the arterial streets within the neighborhood and the community.
Yes, sir. Yes. So there is no other means or measures available to us in order to allocate dollars for water and irrigation?
In this current 2019 budget, it has not been budgeted. What I mentioned to the manager at one point, because we were looking at getting whole new street crews and everything else, is if you're going to do it, I think what we have to do is try to find a dedicated type of revenue source to that type of project. One thing we had talked about last year was using any funds that we brought in from code compliance and actually dedicating those dollars into a separate fund. It's just a matter of finding a source that we can dedicate. I personally don't think the whole stipend thing works. But again, it's a matter of getting the capital dollars, because some of these areas are not irrigated at this point. So you'd have to get the capital dollars to put in the irrigation, So again, Public Works would have to go back and identify every area that you're looking at. And then we would have to come up with the cost. If it's $300,000 now, maybe we're only looking for another $100,000 a year, to water. I don't know, because I don't know how many areas don't have irrigation at this point. But then possibly trying to find something, I know Mr. Gagnon had looked at, putting in something, and really then creating a special revenue, putting that money aside, and making that project work. I think it's worth taking a look at, but in the 19 budget, there's, it's just not there. And again, to come up with the money to water before you have the infrastructure in place,
And Madam Chair.
we've just got to get it in the right order.
And this is, just as Mr. Sherman has stated, having the infrastructure there first and then coming up with a plan to water. I mean, they have watering trucks that we can purchase to, instead of putting in the irrigation, we could purchase a water truck that would go around and, water the new areas that we are installing, and then, at some point go back and, have a dedicated source.
Perhaps it's incumbent upon us to take a look at the various scenarios, watering truck versus infrastructure, the cost for infrastructure, the cost for water versus the cost for the truck to come around. And then the question will become, who's going to be responsible for driving the water truck to go around and handle that? Do we have sufficient staff? We're going to have to look at several scenarios in order to make this work. I did have a question as it related to the stipend. If we were to, since it was a unanimous vote, if we were to, is it too far from the matter to reconsider and add in that the dollars go?
For this coming fiscal year?
For this,
I would think that they could.
is that a probability, Madam Clerk?
Well, no, well, I'm sorry, yeah. Wait a minute.
I'm just asking if it's a thought.
Really? Yeah, we have a balanced budget right now, so in order to add another 110,000, we'd have to determine.
Excuse me 1 minute. Commissioner Botel, could you mute your phone for us until you get ready to speak? Thank you so much. We were just having a little trouble here. Thank you.
Yeah, we would have to find something to cut in order to accommodate the stipend by placing it back in the budget.
Well,
I tried.
Madam, would that be it? Of course, I would like staff to think that we were talking about putting in irrigation before we were, before we try to flow water. We know that they take pipes and irrigation to flow water, so I think that's an oxymoron to think that we were trying to do the cart before the horse. We definitely talked about this in the beautification discussions that we've been having, and like Jeff said, with the construction that's coming on, we did a program called MEHOP one time, and that's something that we might be able to look at as far as setting aside a source of revenue so that we can water these particular areas. But I still think that it's not something that we should be so comfortable getting away from, not letting our community look any better than it has been looking. And if we come back for our money, it's our money to come back for, so then we could give it to the community so it can look pleasing. So, $40 million for this and $40 million for that, and all of these millions and millions of dollars that these companies are getting from us. We want clean drinking water, we want safe drinking water, but we still deserve to have a pleasing community. So there's that. Any more comments on the budget or the stipend or the irrigation?
Madam Chair, you do still have a public comment card.
Okay, Madam Clerk, can you call the public comment card, please.
Andre Henderson.
Good evening, Board and Madam Manager. I had something planned, but with everything going on, me and Mr. Horton had a pretty good discussion on your bond agreement and no free service. There is a paragraph in there that says, and I'm paraphrasing, but he can read it into record if he needs to. But there are, for situations you have like this, you can create a subclass. It says from time to time, the utility, the district, can create a subclass or a class in which they can modify rates, well, not modify, but adjust rates in any way, or fees. If it's for the purpose of the betterment of the community, for the health of the community, so on and so forth. So this issue that we're discussing as far as the stipend and those things, and you want to give it back to, you don't have to do that. You have a bond agreement in which is pretty locked tight when it comes to, if you take anything out of that bond agreement, you're going to be in violation with those shareholders. So in order not to get into any kind of burn my time up, that was one of the things I think you should consider and have a robust discussion about, because that issue was in there under no free service 4.29. That's where it discusses that. I've read it before into the utilities district meeting when we had an issue. I informed a couple of you about it, and me and Mr. Horton talked about it. I think this can alleviate some of the stress that you guys have about accepting this, and there's no need to accept this agreement when you have it in there. It's kind of reinventing the wheel. But also, when another thing that I found amazing is, and I hope Mr. Horton doesn't take this personal, but the fact that he has all these vacancies and he's the assistant city manager, whew, I don't know how he does it. I don't think he has the time for that. I think he needs to fill these spaces because we've talked before about people you need to hire and you can't get, and ultimately it falls on his head. If he can't fill his positions, then he needs to bring it up, but he's responsible for it. He needs to fill these positions. And so my position is that you do not accept this stipend. You have it in your bond agreement where you can, from time to time, and this is one of those times where you can allocate funds. If the district, you can't, but the district can, and I suggest you look at that. Thank you.
Are there any more comments, Madam Clerk?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I'm sorry, it's a public comment. I'm sorry, I apologize.
Are there any more public comments?
No, ma'am.
Okay, that ends public comments. Mr. Davis, Councilman Davis, go ahead, please.
Mr. Horton, could you please clarify what this board can and can't do as relates to addressing the bond?
Yes. This board can request establishment of a special class, but in order to do that, we would have to get with our rate consultant to do a rate study and determine how those rates will be spread over the entire user base. That takes time. That would take 6 to 9 months to do. I don't see irrigation of a median being a special class. When they talk about special classes, they're talking about end users.
Okay.
I'm not sure that the irrigation of a meter, irrigation of a median would fall into that special class. I guess you could. I would have to get with bond counsel to talk about that and see if it could be done.
So how often do you guys meet with the bond counsel?
I've only had one discussion with bond counsel since I've been here. We are in need of having a second meeting to resolve some issues that we do have.
Okay.
We still have the rate study that the board has yet to approve, and we need to now go in to revise that. So there will be some opportunities to have some discussions. I could bring them up at that time.
So what's been the issue of why we haven't met with the bond counsel?
The last time we met with the bond council was to address a class of wholesale user, and that's something that has not yet been resolved yet. And so we had so many other things that we were having to address that we've not gotten back with bond council on that particular issue.
I don't know if this is taking place, and here's my concern. As we are working on this budget cycle, I think it's very important that any decision we make, the bond council we should have some kind of report from the bond council to know which way we're going, to know what our flexibility is. That's something that should have took place well into the new year, I believe. Not to pointing fingers at anyone, but just I think it's very important that we get the bond council to the table right away for a potential mid-year budget review. We need to have some things in place. So if we are in position to make adjustments, we can do it at that time. But we definitely need to be having a conversation. The bond council really need to come before this board at some point and give a report. You know, the residents need to know, hey, they're paying for these services, and it's their dollars that are working for. They need to know what's going on with the bond, how is it working, what flexibility we have, and just we need to know all the options that we have in place. Because right now we're making a decision as if. I just would like to see a report by mid-budget year, I believe, so we can discuss any potential.
And just keep in mind, we can have the bond council to prepare a report, but in addition to that, we would then need to look at our rate consultant to look at this to determine what the actual rates should be.
Which is something that we still haven't voted on.
That is correct.
And that's been pending now for how long?
6 or 7 months.
February or something.
So we'll be addressing that matter on that rates. I mean, that's something. I think folks need to I think we need to tell the public how important that rate study is and what it means, and what impacts it has on as we talk about the bond and all these other decisions we're making. We're going to make some extremely tough decisions on this board, and we must have all the information, and we make all our decisions based upon the information that you guys, staff, present to us, and we have to trust them.
I'm gonna need a bib, I think.
Because we got that water plant over there that has staff is doing a wonderful job with what we have, but there's a lot more money need to be taken in place to protect this city, and we've seen presentations as a council, as a utility district board, that, hey, we're on notice. So when you don't know us, even though it's a hot political season, we still got to make these tough decisions. And when you let folks make tough decisions, that's what the people need to know, that we're not afraid to do that. Not to say anyone on the board is afraid, but we need to let folks know your life safety is more important than anything in the world. And some of these decisions, the rate study is going to demonstrate that. And in the presentation, I think that needs to be drilled down on the life safety issue. We need to drill down on that. That's very important. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We definitely want the public to know that we are interested in the life safety issues of the water. We're going to talk about the rate study. We're going to talk about how we're going to irrigate the west side of Riviera Beach and make it aesthetically pleasing. We need to fill our positions, and we're going to, expect staff to robustly go after doing that. But at this point, we are. Thank you, Mr. Horton, Madam.
Before Mr. Horton goes, I have one question, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
I'll take it back. What say you to Mr. Henderson's contention that 4.29 no free service suggests that we can make the adjustments?
I think that his interpretation is not correct, but I would refer to our district attorney and would ask that he respond to that from a legal perspective.
And looking at the provision that addresses that issue, I don't think we have that flexibility. And the lack of flexibility is consistent with the advice I've gotten from Bond Council about the obligation of the city to protect the money stream in order to secure the promises made to the bondholders. I think the issue that you got before you tonight is not necessarily whether or not it's permitted by the provisions. You want us to come up with a way so that we can provide water to those streets. You know, irrespective of how it's done, you want us to find a way to get that done. And it does not have to be the utility district's money. Okay, all right. But it would be difficult to use the utilities district's money for that purpose. Usually the maintenance of streets at that level is something that's driven by the general fund.
Okay, thank you, Madam Councilwoman. Madam Chair? Questions, comments?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Are there any more questions and comments from the dais? Okay, we're at the point of.
We need to vote on it.
Oh.
Vote on item number 2.
Okay.
Board Member
May I get a-
Davis.
Yes, ma'am.
Board Member Miller Anderson.
Yes.
Pro Tem Hubbard.
Yes.
Chair Davis Johnson.
Yes.
Unanimous vote.
Did you go Votel? Oh, she's just on.
Okay. Do we have any public comment cards?
Yes, we do. An acceptance of public comments cards has closed for public comments. We have Andre Henderson and Tommy Walker.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess this is, we're conversing, Mr. Horton. I would like it to be read into the record because it's very specific under no free service. There's no point in putting this under no free service unless you're going to allow some reasonable request for free service. You would put it somewhere else. So if it was possible, instead of commenting on it, to read it into record where it would be it's very implicit when it says, from time to time, the district may create classes or subclasses pertaining to the rates and the fees. And it says for the betterment of the community, for the health of the constituents. So I think instead of us commenting on what it means, we should read it into record. So it was very specific, and whoever put it in there, put it on the new free service because this would come up. But also with the idea of allowing mediums to be built without water irrigation, or to put in signs without electrical and irrigation. I think that's part of what I think we're getting at is sometimes decisions are made that are not, the foresight probably isn't understood. So we make decisions to build a nice sign, then therefore we find out if we can put in lighting at night. So I have one of the issues on Monroe Heights. It has signs on both sides, but when you're going into acre homes, it indicates you're going into Monroe Heights. So I don't know if that's a mistake, or because when you come into Monroe Heights, it says Monroe Heights, but when you exit Monroe Heights, it says Monroe Heights. So I'm not sure who was over or what happened, because some of the decisions that were made in the electrical and the irrigation and the planting of foliage, whatever was given, it doesn't seem like somebody put this in the right order. So my point of contention would be for us to have foresight in that view, but also when it's no free, and I'm not a fan of free water, just so you understand. I don't think we should be giving free water away in the city. What I do think is that we can create some subclasses in which we can reduce rates for the elderly, military, or disabled, in that we have 1,700 military veterans in the city of Riviera Beach. We have 300 of them which are Purple Heart veterans, and I think they deserve a special component where they can receive a reduced rate. I don't want them to have free rate, but a reduced rate. So I think if we read that in, I think there's an allocation for us to be able to have that view and put everything else to the side. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tommy Walker.
Tommy Walker, good evening.
Good evening.
I want to talk a little bit about the water bill. I've heard the discussion, but it seems that the board, that we are kind of helpless over the rise, the increases of the water bill. As a elected official, seems like we should have some type of control over the utility district and the way our water bills inflate. I've heard the conversation about the bonds and all of that. I heard the conversation about the buyback. But for the future, I see 2019 is already closed. But as elected officials, I think it's imperative that we get some type of control over the increases of our water bill. Point and simple, I'm not gonna beat that dead horse to death. And Karen took my thought exactly. Down, I'm done with that one, but down Martin Luther King, FDOT put in all that grass with no irrigation, and it came a drought, and it burnt up, and it's still looking ugly. I think we should invest in a truck for the time being until we figure it out. I've seen $377,000. Somewhere we need to figure out how we can get us a little small water truck to take care of all the things that we need to take care of until we can get it into the budget next year. It's not really that hard. It's just that simple. Let's find that money so that we can be beautiful here on the west side. Real simple. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Walker. The Ms. Hoskins, if you can speak to Mr. Henderson's comment and Mr. Walker's. It's not that we thought that it's hard to do. It's that we have to discuss how we're going to do it here in the city. It's not something that we can plan, you know, behind the curtain.
Madam Chair, as it relates to the comments that Mr. Henderson made and the community signs and the neighborhood signs, the original RFP, when those signs, when it was issued, it included the watering and components of electrical. However, the vendor, after he installed the community signs, he walked away from the project. So we have left over roughly $200,000 from that project that we will be using to go back and fix those or add those two components to those neighborhood signs. So it was not that we did not think of those items or, you know, plan without thinking about the water and the lighting. We did. However, as I stated, the vendor did not finish the project. And as it relates to the medians, most of the medians, city medians include irrigation. However, when we're talking about beautification, we are looking at ways to fund the, install the plants, beautify the neighborhoods, and have those items watered and continued maintenance of those items. So we are not planning without thinking ahead and making sure all components are included.
Thank you, Madam Manager, because I don't want the public to think that we went through such an exercise of putting in the monument signs throughout the city and in the community without adding water, lighting, and irrigation to bring the water there. We are going into phase 2 because of the fact that the vendor walked away, as you said. Okay, let's see. Is there any other discussion, Mr. Executive Director?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to give a brief presentation, but I did provide members of the board with my handout of a question that was asked by Councilwoman Miller Anderson. And so unless there's questions, I'll yield back to the board.
Okay, Madam City Manager.
Just to remind you, we do have a workshop scheduled immediately following this meeting, so.
Okay, thank you.
Guess I should have said earlier.
Okay. Any comments from the board?
Did I say something out loud?
Any comments from the board?
None.
None for me.
Okay. In that case, this meeting's adjourned.